All right, so in this video, we're going to take a look at actually editing a data product and get into the weeds of all the things that we can do here and how to set it up. So I'm taking a look at this example carbon uptake in plants that I created in our last video, and I'm on the data product page here. So we've got a lot of things going on. We've got some tabs for the different components of the data product. We've got some actions up here. We've got a button to make this public. Right now it's turned off. So this is not available to anyone who's not an administrator. If you go to the Explorer or the tabulation engine, you won't see it if you're a public user. We also have these actions here. We can go to the audit log, see the changes that have been made to the metadata here. We can import metadata. So this would be coming from a DDI codebook file or an external repository of metadata. We've got a way where we can view the JSON metadata, kind of the API endpoint that people will see if they're using the REST API. We can profile the data. We can turn on or off caching. So if we had a data product that had data coming in every day or every minute or every hour, we could turn off the caching so that it's always going to be the latest data that's coming back. And then we have a way to clear the cache. So this would be, again, if you had maybe a scheduled update once a quarter, you updated the data in the database. You could clear the cache manually through the user interface, or what is more likely, you'd use the REST API to do this at a incremental set increment. And then finally, we can delete the data product from here. So we'll take a look at a few of those later on. Right now, I'm going to look at the properties section here. This is where we're landing, and this is where we can add most of the metadata around the data product. So I can come in here and start adding different fields. If I have internationalization on, then I will see kind of my alternative languages coming in. So I've got English as my default and French is another language. And so I can go through and start editing those things. If you don't have internationalization, you'll just get the single text box there to edit things. You can go through, add descriptions, those types of things, keywords, citation provenance. If you've got a temporal coverage here, you can set the start date when the coverage starts and then when it ends, which is the start date is inclusive, the end date is exclusive. So just take that into account as you're doing that. We also have a couple of options here to set the classifiers as one. So over here on the sidebar, we've got the product classifier. So I could come in here and create codes that I want to use to classify my different data products. Right now, I've got a value of 0, 1, and plant life in English and the French value as well. This affects how the data products show up in the search. So if I go to the search here and take a look at that, we'll see my classifier down here is showing up as plant life. Now, any data products that have that classifier set will show up when I click that classifier. So it helps filter out the different data products. So here's the original carbon dioxide uptake in grass plants that I have. Here's the example one I created for this video series. So let's go back and take a look at that. I'm going to set that classifier to have plant life as well. And once that's done, if I go back to the search and I select plant life, we'll see that the facet count has been updated to 2. And now when I'm doing that filter, the example shows up as well. So it's real easy to kind of classify different data products by these classifiers as needed to help your users search and find things correctly. So I'm going to go back to that thing as well. We've got the default sort variables. This is also very important. So one thing you might not be familiar with if you're not a database administrator is that databases, SQL databases, do not guarantee the results come back in any set order. So even if you've ingested them in an order, there's no guarantee you're getting them back that way. So to make sure that this happens, every time you run a query on the data set in SQL, you should have a order clause in there to make sure things are coming back in a consistent manner. That's what we do here with the default sort variable. So I would definitely highly recommend that you set these. This could be considered like the primary key of your record. So anything that's a unique grouping of these things or a key of the records would be a good idea. If you're using survey data, that would be probably like the respondent ID or something like that. Or if you've got different types of data. It might be a combination of things. It might be a timestamp and an ID or a name or something like that. Just some sort of unique way to order these so that when users are looking through the data and they start adding filters or groups and things like that, it's always going to come back in a consistent order that they can expect. So I'm going to set this to be plant and the concentration. I'm going to select those variables and I'll see those here. So that's going to affect how the data is being returned. Now, we also have the idea of required variables. So in the Explorer, this affects the Explorer. This does not affect the tabulation engine. So a lot of times with survey data, again, if you have weights or things like that, you might want those to be required variables. Or if you've got a primary key, you would want those variables to be required when the user downloads it, so that even if they are looking for certain information and they forget to add these things themselves, they'll always get it when they download that. Now, I'm going to take a look at this, and I'm going to set this to be plant here. This does have an effect on the user interface, which I want to show so that you understand you don't want to put 20 of these things here. So if I set that required variable and I go to the Explorer, and now I'm on our example data set, we can see that plant now has this kind of column here. And this is not the best example because my screen is big enough, but if I can get this to, there we go. If I can get this to scroll, you'll see that the required variables do not scroll. They're fixed over here, and then the rest of the variables will scroll with it. So just be aware that if you set the required variables, those are going to be kind of locked to this left-hand side of the table. But that would be used for things like, the unique identifier of the record, or weight variables that the users need that they might not be aware of or think about downloading on their own. So I'm going to move to the dictionary section here. This is where we have our variables. And we can do some quick edits here on like the label and stuff like that. If you want to make a quick change to maybe a spelling mistake or something like that. But we also have this more in-depth edit, which is going to pull out the variable details here on the side. I'm going to close this. And this can be expanded as needed. Oops, that went away. And so here I can go and start editing these things. Again, if you've got internationalization, this is where you're going to be able to do the internationalized values as well, and go through the different fields here and edit them as you like. So we've got kind of this detail section that's got a lot of the text around the data. We've got codes where if you have a classification set up, or you want to add reserved values, you can do that. So I'll take a look at the classifications in a second. What that is just, that's all managed in this classification tab here at the top. You would go create a classification or a code list. And once those are defined, you can search for those here and associate them with a variable. Now we also have the idea of reserved values. Reserved values are for coded values in non-categorical variables. So, for example, you might have a numeric variable that's continuous, but you use a -99 or a -9 or something like that to indicate that the value was skipped, or it has some sort of special meaning to it. So if I wanted to add a reserved value, I could come here and I could say -99 is my value, and this was a skip, and I can create that. Now we have a flag down here that asks if we want to use this in computations. So what that means is if we add a reserved value, -99 for example, and now we're in the tabulation engine, and someone creates a tabulation and the measure is the sum of this numeric variable, we typically want to skip these because -99 is not a meaningful value in that measure. We want to skip those. But someone could have an age variable, for example, that they've defined to be numeric, and maybe the reserved value is 99, and 99 means 99 or older. And so in that case, you might want to use those in the computations. And so that's what this flag is letting you do. So if you said, what's the average age of this person, and they had a 99, which is a reserved coded value, it would still be used, because even if it represents someone who's 105, the 99 might be good enough to be used in the average to allow that computation to work the way we want it to work. The roles section here defines the roles that the variable plays, and this is both in the metadata, or it's useful for the users consuming this and the metadata that it provides, but it's also useful for the application itself. So we have this dimension, and that is a variable that can be used as a dimension in a tabulation. And so with that flag set as false, you won't have any dimensions in the tabulation engine. I think if I'm correct, if I go through all these, none of them are going to be treated as a dimension right now. They're all flagged as measures. And we try to determine this when we create the data product based on their data type and if they have classifications or codes associated with them and that sort of thing. So we do our best to read these in as we can, but it's not always perfect, so you want to double check. So I'm going to go to the tabulation engine here real quick. And I'm going to go to this example, and we'll see that because we have no dimensions, nothing is showing up in the rows or columns, so I can't do any tabulations on this. So we want to make sure that we come through here after we import our data product, and we take a look at what these are all set to and set the appropriate roles. So in this case, I know that even though this is numeric, this is going to have a classification associated with it. I'm going to set this as a dimension and take the measure off. And the same thing for type and treatment of these plants. Those are going to be the ones that are going to be dimensions. So we can see that these are no longer considered measures. The concentration and the uptake are the measures that would actually be appropriate. Now, we also have some other things here, like weight. Again, in the tabulation engine, there's no weights, so we cannot see or select a variable to use as a weight. But let's say that uptake was a weight. Now, if I come back to the tabulation engine and refresh, we'll see that we've got a selector, a drop down for the weight variables, and I can select that to use. So again, if you're uploading DDI or pulling in metadata from somewhere else, this might be set automatically if that DDI is correct. But you want to come through and make sure that your variables have the appropriate roles set on them. From a metadata standpoint, we also have these flags for if the variables are disclosive, containing personally identifiable information, if they're geographical, or if they're temporal. So you can set those as well. And you can set any number of these that are appropriate for the specific variable. The format section just has information about kind of how this would be stored in a file format. It's a numeric data type. It's actually stored as a double precision in the database. It's the first variable in the list, so its index is 1. And then you can set these for like fixed storage, start and end position, and the number of decimals and things like that. We have a way to add a source. So if you wanted to, let's say that we've got the concentration, and this is derived by doing some sort of calculation on the uptake. I can add a derivation here, and I can give it a just human readable description of what the derivation is, what was being done. I can add associated variables, so I could say that the uptake was used in this, and then I could add some syntaxes, and let's say I'm using SPSS to calculate this. I could do that and add the commands here that I used in SPSS to calculate the concentration. So that's what this derivation or source section is. It lets you kind of define and document the things that happened to create this variable. And finally, we've got the statistics or frequencies for the variable. So if we have a new data product like this, again, if you have metadata that you're importing, that might have the summary statistics and frequencies, and those can be imported. In this case, I have not had anything imported, and I did not have those. So I can actually come up here and profile this data product. And that will go to the database. It'll get the frequencies and the summary statistics for the variables based on their types. So these are all numeric, so we probably won't have any frequencies. But if I go to the plant and go to the statistics, maybe I need to refresh. There we go. Now we can see that we've got 84 populated, 0 missing, and we've got values between 1 and 12. So let's go to the classifications, and I'm going to take a look at our Explorer real quick. I've got plant types of 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I'm going to say that I'm going to create a classification for plant types. I guess this is the ID, so it should be more no white spaces and all that type of thing. So I'm going to say plant types. And because I don't know French, I'm going to do this. Okay, so now I've got my classification that I've created. I can come here, I can add a description if I want to. I can edit the name, or I can start adding codes here. So I've got code value of 1, 1. So I'm going to leave the French empty for now. 2, I'm just going to call it 2. 3, 3, and finally 4. All right, so I've got my codes here. Again, I can edit these things by selecting the values here if I want to. I can delete them and create new ones. I can also set these to be residuals, which is what we call anything that's going to be like a missing value or skip or things like that. And so those can be flagged here if appropriate. So now I've got my classification for plant types here. I can go back to my dictionary section, go to plant, and maybe plant type was not the correct thing because I see I have a plant and a type, but I'm just going to keep moving along with this. And I can select a classification. So now I can see the classifications that are available. I can search for them if I want to. You know, I've only got one, so that doesn't really help. And it gives me the number of codes that are there. So I can select this and set that as a classification for this variable. So we'll see that I've got the codes here where I can look at them real quick. I can navigate to the classification, which will take me to that page and that tab, or I can remove the association with the classification here. Now, again, if I wanted to reprofile this, and I'm going to refresh because that seems like what I need to do for this, and I come get these statistics, now I'm going to see the frequencies for the coded values as well. So we'll see that we have an even distribution between all 4 options there. And then I also have the summary statistics, which are just going to tell me the populated and missing for this instance. One thing I should mention is that in the Explorer and Tab Engine, when I do this profiling things, that's going to affect the statistics section here of the variable details. You'll also notice that when I started out, plant has details, filter, and stats. But if I refresh this, now that I've associated a classification with it, we'll see that the code is coming through 1 instead of the numeric value. I've also got a codes tab here where as a user I can search for codes. I can download the codes in CSV or some different script syntaxes. And then the filter is going to let me filter using the codes now instead of just a numeric filter. And then finally our statistics are going to show up here as well, where we can see the different values and frequencies and whatnot. So as you're going through the manager and updating the metadata, that will come through to the Explorer and Tab Engine where the users can see the variable details. All right, so I'm going to go, we've done the properties of the data product, we've done the dictionary, we've done some classification work. Now I'm going to go to the documents here. This is where we can add associated documents. So if you had a survey, like a PDF survey that was sent out when people were collecting the data, you could attach that here. If you have additional weight files, you could attach that here. If you've just got the original data dictionary or other documentation that you think is helpful for users to have, you can add that here. So I'm going to go through here, and if I add a document, I'm going to get a new document here. And let's just say I'm going to put this as an example document. Now, if you, again, are in a internationalized version, you have the ability to select the languages that the document is written in. So that's what this is. I'm going to say it's written in English. You can also select the languages it is presented to. So if you have an English data dictionary and a French data dictionary that you're putting up here, maybe you just want to show the English data dictionary to your English users. Maybe you just want to show the French data dictionary to the French users. In this case, I've got an English document and I want to show it to all the users. So depending on, no matter where you're at, you're going to see this. And I'm just going to pick this DDI file here. And I'm going to save this. So saving is one thing. I might want to come back and work on this later. But I can also publish this. So once I publish it, it will be available to anyone that can see the data product. So, or I can delete the document. So right now, this is not published. If I go to the Explorer and go to the attached documents, there's nothing there to use. Once I publish this, we're going to get a little thing here saying that it's published so that we can easily identify that it has been published. And if I refresh this page, we'll see that I've got a supplemental document listed with the name that I presented, the description, and a link to download the file. Finally, we have a changelog section. And so this is where if you want to add information about maybe a change to the database that was made or things like that, you could come in and set the date. So maybe on July 20th, I corrected some issue and important details about the issue that was corrected. So I can go through here and I can add information about what was changed and when it was changed. And then you'll see that I've got that showing up here in the manager. I can edit that or I can remove it. And if I go to the Explorer details, we'll see that there's a changelog section here where that is going to show up so that I can see as a user what happened and when it happened. All right, so finally, let's go through some of these things here. So we already did the profiling. I can clear the cache if I want to kind of do like a refresh and get rid of everything that's been cached. I can turn caching off if I've got data that's coming in on a consistent basis and I just don't want to have to clear the cache all the time. I can view the JSON metadata or I can import metadata. So let's take a look at that real quick. So when I come here, the first thing it's going to ask me is if I want to get this from an external repository or from a DDI codebook. So those are two paths we can take. So just before we do that, the external repositories can be managed here. So if you've got a external repository that you want to add, right now we support Collectica. And so you could come through here and you could set up a Collectica repository. You just need to set up a name for it, describe it, and then give some information about how to connect to the API there. You can go ahead and do that. I've got one here that's got an example Collectica repository already set up. And so if I go back to that data product we were working on, and I go to import, and I click external repository, that's going to let me pick that and then search through all the data sets that are stored in that Collectica repository. In this case, I have a DDI codebook for this file, and so I'm going to go that route. So I need to upload my DDI. So you'll see I have two DDI files, one in XML, and then I have a French one as well. So I'm going to start with the regular one, which is English. It lets me pick a data set based on what's found in the DDI codebook. There can be more than one. And then it lets me select the language I want to import this to in RDS. So I'm saying I'm importing this into the English metadata for RDS. And then it gives me some options of the things I want to import. I want to keep all those there. So I'm going to import this. It'll run through the import process. And then we'll see things are updated now. We've got a name of the data product. We've got the abbreviation, which might have been from what I had there. We've got a description filled out in English. And if I go to the dictionary, we've got the different variables here, which I don't think we did too much with. If But we do have some new classifications here. So we've got the type and the treatment. And those should be here as well. We probably just need to refresh the whole page. There we go. So now we've got the plant identifier, the origin, the treatment, and then the question text coming back. And these three have classifications associated with them. So I've gotten some of that done. We'll see, though, that we have no French values in here, just the English values. So if I go back to the main properties page, come back to the import metadata, now it's got one more step that I need to choose from. If I wanted to re-import the same file that I had, maybe we fixed some bugs in the import process or added some new functionality there, and you just wanted to rerun it, you could go ahead and do that. Or I can select a new source. So I'm going to go ahead and pick a new DDI codebook. And I'm going to use the French one this time. It's being imported in French, and I'm going to keep all these the same. And now this is going to be imported, and I should have kind of the associated French values here for the different things. And again, I probably need to refresh this before I do this. But if I go to the classifications, we'll see now that the French values are showing up as well. And so I've been able to associate the metadata with the different values in the data here for the data product. Finally, once everything is done and I've gone through and I have taken a look at all these, we can see now that we have the values coming through on the details. We've got the codes for all these things available, and so on and so forth. We can see all that coming through. We've got different, let's see if I refresh this. We've got the dimensions that we can pick and the different measures showing up and the weights as well. So once I'm happy with how the data product is looking, now I can publish this or make it public for the users to see. I can see it in the Explorer and Tab engine because I'm logged into the manager and I have a manager role, but no one else can, so I need to make this public. Now I just do that by toggling that. And once I do that, if I log out of my manager, so I'm no longer a manager, and I come to my search and refresh, I'm still going to see that showing up here for me to start working with.